Question of the day. Does Brent Venables know what he's doing, or does he suffer from Billy Napier disease? Lustradamus is going to let you know right now because it's time for another prediction video. Oh, yeah, good morning. That is Uncle Lou here. That's right. It is me, Lustradamus, live on YouTube for you. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not already. I post these pointless, barely watchable college football videos almost every single day of the year. Some of them are watchable, some of them aren't. You can make up your own mind on that. Let me know in the comments down below. But one thing they will do, they will lower your blood pressure and get you off of that Lipitor, which is killing you from the inside out. So that's some good news there. We're going to talk about the Oklahoma Sooners today, 2025 football season. I'm going to do a game-by-game prediction. You can see I've got the schedule pulled up over here. I'm going to go through it game by game and give you a winner and a loser for every single week. But before we get to that, we'll wrap up last year's season for Oklahoma. Look forward to this year. Talk about the roster, some coaching changes, things like that. And then we're going to go ahead and go through the schedule. Now, last year was not good for Oklahoma. In fact, Brent Venables' tenure at Oklahoma has not been good, at least as far as the results on the field are concerned. They've recruited okay, but it hasn't translated to wins, at least not nearly enough wins to satisfy the Oklahoma fan base, which, of course, has a long tradition of football excellence. 2 losing seasons in 3 years for Brent Venables. The only 2 losing seasons Oklahoma has had since last century. So it hasn't gone good. They were 6-7 last year. They had a couple of decent wins. They did lose their first SEC game last year, of course, being their first year in the new league. They lost their first SEC game to Tennessee. They then beat Auburn on the road, and then it kind of just fell apart. They had 3 losses in the row. It started with the Texas game. Then they lost to South Carolina. They lost on the road at Ole Miss. They ended up losing to Missouri. A good game, a close game, and they did lose on the road at Missouri. Alabama was definitely their best win of the season, 24-3, a weird game at the end of the year for Alabama. Oklahoma gets the win there, and then they follow it up the following week with a loss on the road against LSU, and of course, they lost a bowl game to Navy. Completely unacceptable. Oklahoma, you got to get it together. Now that you're in the SEC, you can't be losing a group of 5 teams. It's just unacceptable. Don't let that happen again. Brent Venables is on the hot seat. He's got to win some games this year. He could be fired at the end of this season with another sort of 5, 6, 7 win season, anything in that range. I just don't think Oklahoma is going to keep him around regardless of the recruiting. He's made significant staff changes. He's brought in a transfer quarterback to replace Jackson Arnold. We'll talk about all that here coming up in a second. But to the Oklahoma fans watching, is there a minimum number of games for you that you need to see him win this year before you sort of turn your back on him, or whatever you want to start calling for him to be fired, whatever the case? Not that it's up to the fans to make that decision. I'm not suggesting it is, but I'm just curious sort of where the Oklahoma fans' mindset is at heading into this season. If they go 8-4, that would be an obvious improvement over last season. Is that something that you can look and say, well, we can build on that going forward? What if he goes 7-5? I'm pretty sure if he has a losing record, the majority of Oklahoma fans are going to turn on him. But what if he's, what if he goes 6-6? What if he goes 7-5? Let me know. Is there like a minimum number of games you expect him to win? Let me know. All right, let's take a look at what Oklahoma is going to look like in 2025. Now, they do get some key pieces back. They also lose some pieces. Of course, quarterback Jackson Arnold, who started some last year, was benched, then got the start again, then was benched again. It was kind of a turnover machine. It didn't go well. It was a second-year guy playing in his first year. He was a redshirt of the year before. It didn't go well. He's transferred out to Auburn, which makes for an interesting game for Oklahoma coming up this season when they play Auburn. We'll talk about that in a second. But they bring in John Mateer, the quarterback from Washington State. So, yeah, Cam Ward had a great season at Miami last year, right? Well, he was a transfer down from Washington State. Washington State replaced Cam Ward with John Mateer, and he had a great year last year, 3,000-something yards, a bunch of touchdowns, not very many interceptions. He can run around some. He had a really, really good year. So Oklahoma brought him in and the offensive coordinator. So kind of a package deal with that there. Similar to what Vanderbilt did with Diego Pavidi and his offensive coordinator from New Mexico, trying to maybe replicate some of the success Vandy had, not as a team or a record, but I mean, as far as the sort of quarterback offensive coordinator combo goes. They get a lot of pieces back on defense, and that's important because Oklahoma had a pretty good defense last year. It was primarily their offense that held them back. And they had a ton of injuries too. I mean, that is true. We can't just ignore that. Now, everybody gets 85 scholarships because we all know injuries happen all the time. So injuries isn't necessarily an excuse for poor performance over the course of a season, but you can't just gloss over the fact that particularly at the wide receiver position, Oklahoma was just absolutely decimated by injuries last year. But the defense kept them in a lot of their games, and they get some key pieces back there. Defensive end Mason Thomas, they get Dominic Williams back, Jaden Jackson is back, Kip Lewis, Eli Brown, Peyton Bowen. A lot of the familiar names from last year's defense are back. And with Brent Venables as your head coach, I would expect Oklahoma to field a pretty good defense in 2025. Definitely some sort of top 20, top 25 level defense. And it could be better than that. It could be top 10. But I mean, I would expect at a minimum Oklahoma to field a top 20 or top 25 defense, and for their defense to be good enough to keep them in the majority of the games they play. Now, you still got to score points, and we're going to get to that now with the offense. I mentioned John Mateer, the quarterback from Washington State, but they also bring in a running back from Cal, Jaden Ott, and he's probably the best running back out of the portal. I don't know. I'm not really an evaluator that way. I know I'm a Georgia fan. Most of you probably already know that. Georgia's my favorite. Well, I'm a college football fan. Georgia's my favorite team is the way I like to put it. I wanted Georgia to go after Jaden Ott, and for all I know, they did, and Oklahoma just beat them out. Georgia ended up getting McCray from Illinois, but I think Jaden Ott's going to be really, really good in this Oklahoma offense. He's from Cal. They bring in several wide receivers from the portal, and they get a lot of wide receivers back that were injured last year. Deion Burks, who was a transfer from, was it Purdue, I believe, last year, only played 4 or 5 games, was hurt the majority of the season, along with a couple other of their big name wide receivers that they expect to have back and at full strength this season. So if John Mateer works out at quarterback, if Jaden Ott works out at running back, and if they can stay healthy, and if those wide receivers that were injured last year sort of live up to the hype that they had entering last season, then I think Oklahoma can have a pretty good offense and win significantly more games than they won last year. Two or three more games, probably, right? The schedule is not easy. We're going to get to that. In a second. Turnovers and injuries. That was the story for Oklahoma last year. Offensively, quarterback, hokey pokey, a bunch of different QBs playing, rotating them in and out, turnover machines, injuries at the wide receiver position, very inconsistent offensively. So a bunch of changes this year on the offensive side of the ball, and a lot of sort of known commodities returning on a defense that I thought played pretty well for the majority of the season. Now, let's talk about some of the odds for Oklahoma heading into the 2025 season. Now, the odds are not a guarantee of what's going to happen. Odds are more or less a snapshot of what people think about a team, right? People bet money on things, and that moves the odds up and down. So when you look at Oklahoma and their odds to win the SEC championship, well, you can probably guess they're not very high. They're 9th. In terms of odds, they are the 9th sort of favorite to win the SEC. Texas, Georgia, Bama, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Florida, Auburn, and then Oklahoma. So they're 9th in terms of the odds to win the SEC. So not a lot of expectations for Oklahoma in terms of winning the SEC. But remember, we're in the age of the 12-team playoff now. Only one SEC team's going to win the SEC. There's going to most likely be 3 or maybe 4 SEC teams that make the playoffs. So it's not like it was under a 14 playoff where you sort of had to start your goal at a minimum of sort of winning your league to get to the playoffs. There were some teams that didn't win their league that got into the 14 playoff, but primarily speaking, heading into a season as a fan, that's where you sort of gauged your success level at in terms of the ability to make the playoffs. Well, we got to win our league. Not necessarily the case anymore. So Oklahoma doesn't have to win the SEC to make the playoffs. If last year is any indication, you need to strive for basically 10-2. It's possible a 9-3 team could get in, depending on what else goes on in the rest of the world of college football. But I think 9 or 10 wins needs to be every team's goal in terms of reaching the postseason. So just because they're 9th in odds to win the SEC doesn't mean it's impossible for them to make the playoffs. Now, they're a long shot to make the playoffs for obvious reasons. Let's take a look at their win total. This is another number I like to look at. Again, this is a betting number, so people bet on how many games they think a team is going to win. This is in the regular season, so it's out of 12 possible games. It doesn't include any potential conference championship game, bowl game, playoff, anything like that. It's just looking at the 12-game regular season, and people are placing money on how many games they think a team will win. Again, doesn't mean they're going to win this amount of games or anywhere close to this amount of games. It's just an indication of how the betting public feels about a team heading into a season. When you look at Oklahoma, the number for them right now is 6.5 wins. Obviously, you can't win 6.5 games. The way this number works is you either bet over or under that number. So some people are betting Oklahoma over 6.5 wins, meaning they're going to, they think they're going to go 7-5 or better. Some people are betting under 6.5 wins, meaning there are people that think Oklahoma is going to go 6-6 or worse. The sort of median number there being 6.5. That's the expected win total for Oklahoma in 2025. All right, let's put their schedule up. Well, it's already up. Let's start to go through the schedule here. I'm going to give you a winner and a loser for every single week. I'm going to do my best to sort of explain my thought process as I go along. I don't expect everybody to agree with what I'm doing here, and try to concentrate more on sort of the overall record we end up with. Rather than the individual wins or losses. It's extremely hard to pick the wins and losses for any team. It's much easier to kind of look at the schedule and go, they're probably going to split these 4 games here, or maybe they're going to split these 2, or they got 4 road games. Maybe they'll win 2, lose 2. Probably going to go 8-4. That's easier than having to go through this schedule game by game and actually pick a winner and a loser, but that's the way I like to do it. So that's what we're going to do. Now, Oklahoma starts off with a sort of a cupcake non-con game here in week 1. They host Illinois State. I think it's a great year for Oklahoma to have one of these games early in the season. They need some confidence offensively. There's a lot of new pieces there. The pieces that are left over from last year, they did not play well. They didn't perform well. The offense really held them back last year. They've got a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator, several new wide receivers, whether you're talking transfer portal or players that were injured last year and are now sort of reworking their way back into the offense. The new running back, Jay Knott. Just a lot of new pieces offensively. I think this is a good year for Oklahoma to start off with one of these games. Let all these new pieces sort of mesh together, get their feet wet in a game that Oklahoma should be a significant favorite in a game I would expect Oklahoma to win easily. But then it gets a lot harder than that week 2 when Michigan comes to town. Now, Michigan's got some issues too. They had one of their worst seasons in a while last year as well. They went 7-5. Like Oklahoma, they also beat Alabama. So overall, for Michigan, just like with Oklahoma, a disappointing season. And their biggest win was probably that Bama win at the end of the year. They also beat Ohio State in the regular season. So a very talented team, Michigan. Same with Oklahoma. What held Michigan back? Their offense. Very similar situations last year when you look at Oklahoma and Michigan. Had defenses that I think were good enough for these teams to be top 15 teams, and offenses that just couldn't get out of their own way. I mean, just really, really bad. The passing game at Michigan last year is one of the worst maybe that you'll ever see. I think they averaged 80 or 90 yards per game passing. They've also got a new quarterback. It's likely to be true freshman Bryce Underwood, and I think that's very important for this particular game here. While Oklahoma's got a new QB in John Mateer, he's not a freshman. He's got years of experience under his belt, high-level experience. It's also a home game for Oklahoma. Now, I think by the end of the year, Michigan is a potential playoff team. I think Michigan's going to be really good. Their defense is going to be great. They're going to have really good lines of scrimmage again. And if they can get anything close to average out of their quarterback and their passing game over the course of the season, I think they'll do much better than last year's 7-5 and could be competing for a playoff spot at the end of the year. But early in the year, a true freshman quarterback having to go on the road to Oklahoma and play a really good Brent Venables defense, I think this is going to be a low-scoring game, and I think Oklahoma gets the win here. Again, This is not a shot at Michigan. You'll see when I do my Michigan prediction video coming up in a few days. I'm very high on Michigan, very high. And I think they're going to be significantly better in weeks 6, 7, 8, and on than they are early in the season here, Michigan. But I do think they dropped this game on the road. I've got Oklahoma starting 2-0. Then they have their first road game. It's another non-con game at Temple. This should be another game where Oklahoma will be a significant favorite. And unless they just get caught looking ahead for some particular reason, there's really no cause for concern for Oklahoma here. I think Oklahoma gets the win easily. They're 3-0. And then they have what I think is probably the most interesting game of the year for Oklahoma, and it's this Auburn game. Jackson Arnold was the quarterback at Oklahoma last year. He was benched and then played again and then benched again. He turned the ball over. The fans were all over him. He transfers out and he lands at Auburn. It's a weird situation for Oklahoma here. They're playing two pretty talented teams in the first month of the season, Michigan and Auburn, and none of them have an offense. Michigan's offense didn't exist last year. Auburn's offense, you want to talk about turnovers in the SEC, maybe you start with Oklahoma, but right after that is Auburn. I mean, they couldn't hold on to the ball either. Another team that played multiple quarterbacks. Michigan played multiple quarterbacks. Auburn played multiple quarterbacks. Oklahoma played multiple quarterbacks. These were three bad offenses last year, Auburn, Michigan, and Oklahoma that we're talking about here. Auburn, like Oklahoma, has recruited well under Hugh Freeze, and like Oklahoma, they're not winning nearly enough games for Hugh Freeze to keep his job. This could be a situation here in week 4 where the loser of this game ends up finding themselves unemployed at the end of the season. I don't think the loser of this game is getting fired the next day. That's not what I'm saying. So I don't think Hugh Freeze or Brent Venables, whoever loses this game, is getting fired on Sunday, September 21st. I guess the point I'm making is if Oklahoma's not good enough to beat Auburn, then that means Oklahoma's probably got a lot of losses coming on this schedule right here. And if Auburn's not good enough to beat Oklahoma, then Auburn's probably got a lot of losses coming on their schedule. So I almost feel like this is a loser goes home game in terms of head coaches go. And while I haven't been a huge fan of what Brent Venables has done at Oklahoma, I think they beat Auburn at home. I'm having a hard time buying into Auburn. John Mateer versus Jackson Arnold. At home, the schedule sets up nice here in the first month of the season. Your two toughest games are both at home, and they're winnable games. And I think Oklahoma wins them both. They're 4-0 with wins over Michigan and Auburn, both at home. Then a bye week, and then another non-con game, this time Kent State. Shout out to Nick Saban and Mark Rogers, two most famous alumni from Kent State. I think they get another win. Somehow Oklahoma has started the season 5-0. Remember, they were 6-7 last year. So I don't know. Maybe, am I drinking the Kool-Aid? Am I too high on Oklahoma? People tell me I'm an Oklahoma hater. I don't know. I've got them starting 5-0. That's the good news. Here comes the bad news. I don't think they're beating Texas. I'm a buyer on the Texas hype. I'm a buyer on Arch Manning. I think he's going to be an obvious upgrade over Quinn Ewers. I think they're loaded with NFL talent at every position group on both sides of the ball. I think Sarkisian's a top 5 head coach in all of college football and a top 2 or 3 offensive mind in all of college football. And do I think Oklahoma's going to be improved over last year? Yeah. Do I think they're going to have a better offense? Yeah. Do I think this game could be competitive? Yeah. The Red River Shootout, who knows? Rivalry games, right? Do I think Oklahoma's beating Texas in 2025? No. I think this is their first loss. Sorry. I guess I'm back to being an Oklahoma hater now. I think Texas gets the win. Then they got to go on the road and play South Carolina. And to any Oklahoma fans who might be new to sort of some of the different environments in the SEC, and you look at South Carolina as kind of a perennial kind of bottom dweller in the SEC, that's true more often than not, but that is a very difficult place to play, an extremely difficult place to play, Williams-Brice Stadium. And when they're good, it's very difficult place to play. And I do think South Carolina is going to be good again in 2025. They went 9-3 last year and could have been 11-1. They took Alabama to overtime in Tuscaloosa and had LSU beat at home. And it got away from them in the fourth quarter with a little bit of help from the referees. I think they lose on the road at South Carolina. I think South Carolina is a better team right now than Oklahoma is. I've got some questions about South Carolina that will be answered by the time this game is played, but they lost a lot defensively, particularly in the front seven. They got to replace some running backs, but I love their quarterback, Lenore Sellers. I think he's better than John Mateer. They got Nicholas Harbor, who's a matchup just nightmare for opposing defenses at sort of a tight end wide receiver hybrid type thing. And unlike Venables, Shane Beamer has exceeded expectations in South Carolina in 3 of his first 4 years there. I think South Carolina gets to win over Oklahoma. They dropped 2 in a row. I think Oklahoma turns it around the next week, though, with a pretty good win over a pretty good Ole Miss team at home. I expect Ole Miss to take a little bit of a step back. They were 9-3 last year, could easily have been 10-2 or 11-1 as well. Lost a head-scratching game to Oklahoma early in the season. Lost a game for no reason late in the season to Florida that sort of knocked them out of the playoff picture. So they could have a similar record, Ole Miss, to what they had last year, but in terms of how good they are as a team, I don't think they're going to be quite as good as they were last year. Again, a home game for Oklahoma. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I think they beat Ole Miss. I also think they go into Tennessee and get a win, a big road win here for Oklahoma. They lost this game last year at home. This is the Josh Heupel Bowl, right? He played and coached for a little while at Oklahoma back in the 90s, early 2000s, whatever it was. Now the head coach at Tennessee. I think Tennessee's in for sort of a regression year this year. Even if they would have kept Nico as quarterback, I just think they lost too many other pieces. They lost their best player on defense. They lost all of their wide receivers. They lost their best offensive player, running back Dylan Sampson, the SEC offensive running back of the year, led the league in rushing yards. Tennessee's a very tough place to play. And Oklahoma, this is a game Oklahoma can lose for sure. No doubt about it. But almost every single year, and this goes for every team, not just Oklahoma, but almost every single year, teams will lose a game you didn't expect them to lose and win a game you don't expect them to win. I think maybe this is the game Oklahoma wins where I think Oklahoma will be an underdog in this game, especially having lost 2 of their last 3 to Texas and South Carolina, coming off of probably a close win against Ole Miss at home. You got to turn back around on the road at Tennessee. So you got 4 weeks there where you're only playing one home game. It's Ole Miss. But anyway, I think they go into Neyland and get a win against Tennessee. Have a bye week, come out of that, got to play Alabama. This was their biggest win last year, a shocking win, 24-3 at home against Alabama. I don't expect that to happen again. First of all, you got to go on the road. I think Alabama's going to be much better this season than they were last year. I think Jalen Milroe was a liability for them offensively, especially under a Kalen DeBoer offense and what he wants to do. They've also got Ryan Grubb back at offensive coordinator there. So we'll see what Ty Simpson turns into as a quarterback, but they've got elite level wide receivers. They've got one of the best offensive lines in the SEC, and their defense will be probably top 10 in the country. I don't see Oklahoma going into Bryant-Denny and getting a win. That's the 3rd loss. And then these next 2 games, to me, may end up being sort of what determines whether the fans are happy with Venables or not, because I could see Oklahoma losing each of these next 2 games. Missouri has won 9 and 10 games each of the last 2 or 3 seasons. Although last year they were 9-3, I think they were one of the worst 9-3 teams in the country. I didn't think they were that good, and they lost a lot off of that team. I'm not a big believer in Eli Drinkwitz. I think the last couple of years have been a little bit flukish for Missouri. I think they've had some scheduling benefits, especially last year, that led to sort of some of the wins that they got. I think Oklahoma can beat Missouri. It's an old Big 12 game here. Again, a home game for Oklahoma. Both of these last 2 games are at home. I think they get the win against Missouri. And then I think we're going to be looking at a situation here when we get to this LSU game where Oklahoma is sitting on the 3 losses, so probably not making it to the SEC championship game because all 3 of their losses, at least according to my prediction, are SEC losses. But they're sitting there with 3 losses, which is, again, if last year is any indication, and we only have 1 year to go off of here when it comes to the college football playoff, 9-3 was sort of the bubble, right? You had South Carolina, Ole Miss, Alabama, Illinois, all at 9-3, and they were just sort of like right outside the playoff picture. The point is, going into the LSU game, if Oklahoma's sitting at 3 losses, there are still some scenarios and possibilities where a 3-loss team could get into the playoffs. So this becomes a huge game here at the end of the year at home for Oklahoma, sitting on the 3 losses. Similarly, I think LSU is going to be sitting on 2 losses, maybe 3, not any more than that. in other words, it seems like this Oklahoma LSU game at the end of the year might basically be a playoff game. I don't think Oklahoma's making the SEC championship game. I think there's a possibility for LSU to make the SEC championship game, but I think what's more likely is that LSU gets into the playoffs, if they do, the same way that Tennessee did last year, kind of a 10-2 type of thing where you don't play in the SEC championship game, but sort of get in as the third or fourth SEC team. But anyway, I think this will basically be like a playoff elimination game. It's late in the year. We all know the playoff committee tends to punish teams for losing late, more so than losing early. I think Oklahoma gets the win at home against LSU. This game, to me, comes down to which head coach I kind of trust the least. And I don't really trust either head coach, to be honest with you. But Brian Kelly in these types of games, I don't know. At least with Brent Venables, and I know Brent Venables hasn't won a lot in Oklahoma, but at least with Brent Venables, he's still a young coach. He only got 2 or 3 years of sort of experience to go on, so you can go, well, maybe he can still improve and get better and blah, blah, blah. With Brian Kelly, and I think Brian Kelly's a good coach. I think he's a top 10 coach in the country, right? But in games of this magnitude, if it plays out the way I think it will, where both of these teams are going to be sitting on 2 or 3 losses each, so this becomes a de facto sort of playoff game almost, an elimination game, I've just watched Brian Kelly lose these types of games for 15 years, going back to his days at Notre Dame. And Oklahoma gets them at home. I think Oklahoma is going to benefit a ton from their home schedule here. You look at their home games. LSU, Missouri, Ole Miss, Auburn, and Michigan, all at home. Now, plus the non-con, Illinois State, Kent State. A lot of these teams that Oklahoma are playing at home this year, some of them might be a little bit better than Oklahoma. Some of them might be a little bit worse than Oklahoma. But there's a lot of like similar, like Missouri and Oklahoma. If they played 10 times on a neutral site, maybe they split it 5-5 or it's 6-4 one way or the other. Same thing with Ole Miss, right? But you're getting these games at home. So I think Oklahoma's going to win more of these than they lose at home this year. A lot of this is going to depend on John Mateer and the offensive coordinator that came with him. And obviously, they've got to stay a lot healthier than they did last year, particularly at the wide receiver position. And you need a big year from Jaden Ott at running back. But I do trust the Oklahoma defense. I do trust Brent Venables. He's calling the plays this year defensively for Oklahoma. And I do trust that to keep them in a lot of these games. And I think if that offense comes together, and again, their offense was so bad last year, they don't need to be LSU 2019, nor do I expect them to be. But if they're even sort of an average kind of SEC offense this year, I think 8 or 9 wins is a real possibility. I've got them winning the last 2 games of the regular season at home against Missouri and LSU. I'm going to be honest, it feels to me more likely that they probably lose one of those 2. But when I go through the predictions, this is what I came out with. So I'm going to go with Oklahoma 9-3 in 2025. Losses in the Red River Shootout to Texas, on the road at South Carolina, and at Alabama. So those will be the 3 losses: Texas, South Carolina, and Bama, all 3 away from home, 1 neutral site in 2 road games. 9-3, probably not enough to get Oklahoma into the playoffs, but obviously would be a massive improvement over where they're at right now under Brent Venables, and would definitely save Brent Venables' job. All right, be sure and let me know down below where you think I'm wrong. Call-in shows every Tuesday and Thursday night at 9 p.m. So if you want to call and talk about some of this with me, feel free to do that. I've got a whole series of these prediction videos. I've done about 10 of them now. I don't know, Southern Cal, Colorado, Nebraska, Bama, South Carolina, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arizona State. I've done a bunch of them. There's a playlist. Click back, check them out. Let me know what you think. I do appreciate you watching. Hit the thumbs up, subscribe if you're not already, and have a good morning.